For 60 years, Heel Sound has provided innovative, professional, quality sound for stage, studio, broadcast, and podcast. Grammy-winning artists and sound engineers worldwide trust Heel microphones for their legendary sound. To find out more about the full line of Heel microphones and products, visit heelsound.com. That's HEILSOUND.com. I'm using a Heel PR40 microphone right now. Hey, what's happening? Before we jump into the show, I wanted to see if you had any music on a hard drive. You have a band, you have a project, and you want to self-release your own music. Well, there's an easy way to do it. You can go to distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate and go get your music up on all the streamers. You keep 100% of your royalties, and you can get 30% off by using this code. It's a great, easy way to get your music up on the streamers and share it with your fans, your friends, your family, your mom, your dog, everybody. Everyone wants to hear it. But go to distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate, HYPHENATE, and send me the link. I want to hear it too. Send your mom the link. Send your dog the link. They all want to hear it too. Izotope is a proud sponsor of today's episode. Do you know about their new RX12? This is the way to make your audio flawless, all-in-one audio restoration. RX's 50-plus tool ecosystem is everything you need to rescue, refine, and enhance every project, blending surgical control with rapid results. Fully flexible, RX12 includes a standalone audio editing application and suite of software plugins to use in digital audio workstations. For decades, RX has pushed what's possible in audio editing and restoration, bringing out magic in every scene, song, and story. Powered by pioneering machine learning tech, it's the supporting star behind countless Oscar, Grammys, Emmys, and the winner of a Technical Academy Award. Go get this for yourself. Izotope RX12. It's out. IZOTPE.com.
A lot of them didn't go up to LA. It's like, why would we drive 50 minutes to play in front of no one? And we could just go in someone's backyard 5 minutes away and just play for 4 hours and it'd just be debaucherous.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to almost 4th of July, 250 years of America. You're listening to Hyphenate with me, your host, Randy Randall. This is our show for Thursday, July 2nd, 2026. On today's show, I interview author, journalist Daniel Kohn. His latest book is called Tearing Down the Orange Curtain, How Punk Rock Brought Orange County to the World. It's an awesome book. It's really fun. It's a great read, especially if you grew up here in the Southern California area or you're a fan of music from Southern California. It's got a lot of great stories of the 80s, 90s, and aughts and beyond here, just the roots of where a lot of this Orange County punk music got made, how it exploded, TSOL, Fullerton, what do we got here? The Agnews. You got a lot of cool information, especially, if you kind of remember this time, Another State of Mind, BYO. It is cool, man. You get a little bit of Sublime, No Doubt, in there as well. You get the Warped Tour. I don't know. Yeah, Mike Ness, Social Distortion. It was a fascinating read. I really dug it. And I'm so stoked Daniel took the time to come on the show and talk about it. Oh, The Offspring, of course. Who could forget The Offspring? Right? I mean, so many bands. It was fun. It really took me back to growing up here in the Inland Empire in the 90s and seeing so many great shows. We even talked about Face to Face, one of my guilty pleasures. Not so guilty pleasures. But they're from out in the Inland Empire. But, they played a lot of shows. It definitely sounds like it was a hard one to wrangle, really, defining what Orange County is. Because it's not just the shows that happened there, but really the bands that came from there. So Daniel and his co-author, Nate Jackson, had their work cut out for them and really just putting a fence around, what they covered in this book. I mean, you could have 14 volumes of this book. They just go on. You just go a little bit further north to South Bay, all the way over this kind of North County, San Diego. There's a lot of music coming out. It was a big explosion of music. Still a lot of music happening, but it's fun to sort of have a mile marker, so something like this to look at look back and see all this great music and sort of where it came from, and out of bedrooms and garages and backyard keggers to, headlining festival stages and all around the world. It's a cool story. It's definitely reminded me of a lot of practices in garages and bedrooms and 4-track, players on the floor. It's fun. It's fun. Yeah. Getting creative in the suburbs. So thanks, Daniel, for coming on. You can follow Daniel and buy the book. He is on the Instagram, the Daniel Kohn, TheDanielKohn, the Daniel Kohn. He has links there to everything. The Hatchet Book Group is the publisher. I think they got the link here. And I'll put this all in the show notes if you want to look at the show notes. But, wherever you buy books, Tearing Down the Orange Curtain, How Punk Rock Brought Orange County to the World. I first met Daniel at LAX. We were going to South by Southwest, I don't know, a bunch of years back. And I'm just sitting in the airport with a guitar in a soft case, and we get to talking. I think he was the managing editor or something to do with Spin magazine at the time. And I remember growing up listening, reading Spin all the time. I loved Spin, so it was really fun, just chatting. And he got me, put me on the list for the Spin party that night. I forget all who played. I remember Dead Tooth, this great band from New York. I met them there, and kept in touch with those dudes after that show, but it was really fun. It was yeah, it was a funny one. And I'm like, cool, I'm on the guest list for the Spin magazine party at South by Southwest. Well, look at me. Yeah. So, it was a blast catching up with Daniel and talking all things Orange County and punk rock. And, go buy the book. It's a great way to celebrate, America. Sure. America, 4th of July, 250 years. I mean, there's a lot of things to not think about, or to not think about. I don't know. It's a mess. I think our federal government at this point is 10 different clown cars all set out on fire, riding around in a dumpster full of diarrhea. But there's still a lot of American ingenuity, a lot of American spirit. I believe in America. Just not this version, right? This is how this always works. It's a conversation, but hopefully one side has spoken loud for a while, and we're going to get to respond in some kind of larger. The left will have a response to this, and I think it's already happening on a national level. So more to come, America. Hang in there, America. 250 years. It could get better. All right, everyone. Be well, be safe. Don't blow off your fingers. If you do, send me a note and say you told me so. And you can write us hyphenate@gmail.com. And without further ado, here's my interview with Daniel Kohn, Tearing Down the Orange Curtain, how punk rock brought Orange County to the world. Daniel, welcome to Hyphenate. How you doing, man?
I'm good, and you?
Good. I've just been enjoying this great book, Tearing Down the Orange Curtain, the punk rock, how punk rock brought Orange County to the world. Forward by Mike Ness, you and Nate Jackson. How has this? The book's been out for about a year now. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, with the paperback coming imminently, I think.
Amazing.
We're the last to know these type of things.
Incredible. Well, yeah. How did this book come into existence?
So Nate and I had worked with each other at the OC Weekly. I was a freelancer for him for more years than I'd like to admit. And then as the Weekly became a sinking ship, Nate joined me at a different outlet to where we worked together. And from there, we decided that we wanted to write a book. Then we realized that this is probably a good topic, but someone had to have done it already, we figured, and a little bit of research showed that that wasn't the case. So over the next, let's call this July 2019, over the next 3 to 4 months, we steadily crafted a book pitch, which served as our roadmap of what to do, and kind of tricked our way into speaking with a bunch of the luminaries in this. And by 2022, we had a book deal and got really rolling on it. And it just felt like something important. And, granted, COVID didn't really help our cause.
I was going to
It
say,
set us
something
back-
happened. Yeah, you start in 2019. It's not like you knew that there was a giant wall you were all going to run into.
Right. And then by mid 2021, we started getting our sea legs again. And then by the end of 2021, we, within like a 12-day span, interviewed Dexter Noodles from The Offspring and Mike Ness and Johnny Two Bags from Social Distortion and / Cadillac Tramps for Two Bags. And away we went.
Amazing. And yeah, I'm just remembering, to set the stage. I think I first met you at LAX flying out to South by Southwest, right? Yeah,
indeed.
Yeah, that was a bunch of years ago.
Yeah, and that's what this thing was. We were in the still. This is a good idea, but I think we have to do this phase.
Okay.
At that point, because I'm thinking back to the most recent South by I went to in 2024, where I had South by all day, all night, and then I had to write for 3 hours when I got back to the room, and then wash, rinse, repeat on like 2 hours of sleep every day.
Which
wild. You know how that goes with how busy that.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it became a marathon thing at some point. I don't remember why or when or how it all happened, but it was like, how many shows can we play in one day? We played, I think the most we ever played was like 7 shows in one day, which sounds like not that crazy, but just even playing, getting across town is just nuts. Walking 2 blocks with all your gear is nuts. Everything during that time is crazy.
It's like playing Frogger.
Yes, exactly. It's a wild week sort of whole experience.
And imagine trying to write a book at like 2:30 in the morning.
Impossible.
After all that.
Impossible. Yeah. That's incredible. So we met, you were working with Spin, and I was reading a little bit, just about you and your biography, but you come from the East Coast and then you moved out to LA around 2000, the early aughts. Is that right? Tell me a little bit about growing up and how did music first sort of come into your life? Where did this all get started for you as an interest?
Well, yeah, I grew up on Long Island and, I don't know. I was gonna say I don't know what my generation is. I was born in '81, so I'm kind of on the border.
As me. Yeah. We're the old millennials. We're the young Gen Xers are the old millennials, somewhere in there. The Xennials.
Six of one, half a dozen of the others. Yeah. So my parents were always into music when I was growing up, but my very different type of music. They listened to what's now known as classic rock, like Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty.
Sure.
All that type of stuff. And then when I was at summer camp, when I was 11 years old, I heard the opening chords to Smells Like Teen Spirit. It changed everything for me. And then around that, and when I got home from camp that summer, I started watching a little thing called MTV back then. And it was there where I started, expanding my musical palette outside of alternative and grunge and started seeing different things for, and I have a new appreciation for some of my parents' tastes as well. And then it was through MTV. I remember seeing the video for Story of My Life. And it was the first time that I'd seen someone with a sleeve of tattoos on each arm. And it was the first time I'd heard like this swingy type of like rock, but rockabilly, but, and meets country. It was like all this stuff that I'd never heard before because everything I was, into was super fast, super loud, super in your face. And there was something like sweet and melodic about that song and like the longing and the looking back that really attracted me to the music. And then, then through middle school, we were, until Cobain died, that was what we were doing. And then all of a sudden I came back from camp that summer of '94. All my friends were listening to The Offspring. That was, I'm like, and that's what, it's like, okay, that's what we're doing now. They're skateboarding and listening to this type of movement.
Yeah.
It's like, sure. Okay.
Day
and then
swooped in. Yeah. It's going to change things.
Green Day, same time. Yeah. Exactly. So my palette, expanded again. And a few years later, Sublime came out and, was like, oh, what is this weird blend of music? It's this faraway land. It's like, it's not Long Beach, New York. It's Long Beach, California. It's like, oh, there's a Long Beach in California. And there was Sublime. It was just so different than anything I'd heard at the time. And it was like, what is like these tracks just jumping around from like reggae to hardcore to just acoustic rock to like all this stuff. And it was like, it was just so interesting to me, which, I guess in hindsight, it might have been not been the popular opinion at the time. But, and then with No Doubt, my brother was into No Doubt. I heard someone play it a few times at camp. And I'm like, oh, this is like interesting enough. I'm like, there's a female front person. That's new. That's kind of cool. And that's how I got introduced to the big four of this book, was through that. And then when I moved to California in 2008 to go to graduate school, I just gained a newfound appreciation for the music that I hadn't thought about in a while. Just being there, it just made a lot more sense, being in the place and feeling the vibe and understanding what they were singing about. Because I'd only been to California, in my early 20s. That was the first time I'd been to Southern California. So living there and experiencing it gave me an appreciation for the lyrics, and more so the sound. The sound it's like you could hear where the influences came from in the place that made it be what it became.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, that it's funny. So many of the stories, when we'd be on tour, we'd always talk to people like, "Oh, we're from California." Like, "Oh, California sucks." Like, "Oh, what was your experience?" Like, "Oh, yeah, when I was 12 years old, we went to Disneyland. There was traffic." And you're like, "Okay." It sounds like you really got the whole experience of it, but it was time and time again. So many people, wherever we would travel, it was like, "Oh, LA, it's terrible. It's just, it's this." And I'm like, "You went to Disneyland and you were a kid and you just heard your..."
It's not even LA. Yeah. It's Anaheim.
You just heard your parents complain about how expensive it was and how you couldn't go anywhere.
God, imagine it now by comparison, right?
Exactly. But I feel like that's so many people's experience of Southern California or of LA, quote unquote, is flying in and going to Disneyland and listening to their parents bitch and moan about it. And so then therefore that's what it is. But to be honest, I mean, it was always that thing too, like, especially in the early aughts when we first started touring, people were like, "Oh, LA sucks." And for us, we were paying $500 for a 1-bedroom guest house off Melrose and La Brea, in Hollywood. And it was great. We had like 6 people living there, and so we all paid, $100 a month or less than, and we were just, we had a skate ramp in the back, and we would go to all
what
of the
street?
shows. Well, I was right off Fuller and Willoughby.
So my first apartment was across from Jim Henson. So
right, way up on what is that? Franklin and
it's like it's before Frank. It's La Brea and Fountain.
Oh, they're at Fountain, right? Yeah, yep.
So it was blocks from it was because you were right past that Best Buy, Target, or whatever.
Right. Well, yeah. Before that was even there. Yeah. I mean, I moved out there in '99, and I got a job. There was a video store there called Rocket Video. It was kind of like the cool underground, sort of independent video store. And but it was just fun. I mean, we skated around, we rode bikes everywhere. We had vegan potlucks. We played kickball in the park. It was a sort of like easy, well, affordable within our means, kind of little spot. And so when everybody said how terrible it was and how Brooklyn was so cool and Portland was so cool, and we're like, okay, like I don't know, it's 72 degrees and rains 2 days out of the year, and okay, but yeah, you're right, it sucks. Don't come out here. And then eventually that would all change, and then everything would get super expensive. And now those same
imagine what it is now,
$4,000 a month or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Imagine what that house would cost today. Oof.
Yeah. But we were having fun and kind of living it up back then. But yeah, I can see what you mean. But I grew up in the Inland Empire, Walnut, which is kind of where the 57 and the 60 meet. So not too far from Orange County. And we were always going to the beach. And, my first job was at Disneyland. And so I feel like I was familiar with the Huntington Beach, Anaheim sort of world of stuff growing up in the 90s. But it's funny talking about that time and place and the sound, it's like, how do you describe California as a sound? It's like, is it the Beach Boys? Is it all this other stuff? But, I think when looking at like through the lens of that 80s, 90s punk rock, it's interesting. It's interesting kind of in reading the book, kind of getting an outside perspective on it and sort of seeing like what were the ingredients that came in to make this scene. So I mean, what, in terms of when you were out here, living and breathing music and writing about music, how do you describe that sort of blend of the Orange County sort of scene versus all the other little enclaves within Southern California, and especially within that music culture? Like what sort of makes that Orange County scene different?
Orange County specifically is the sound of the suburbs. That's what differentiated itself from other punk scenes, but within Orange County, it's splintered into various different scenes between Fullerton, between Huntington Beach, between South County. It's like there's micro scenes within a scene, and it all gets kind of lumped together. I mean, you've probably played down there a bunch. You kind of know the difference between playing in Fullerton, Anaheim versus HB, and like and anything like Seal Beach or anything adjacent down there. How different the crowds can be. And it's hard when people ask, like, "Oh, well, isn't it like right next to each other?" It's like, no, it's 30 to 40 minutes away from each, general locale. So within that, you kind of pick up. There's certain ticks that made the sound what it is. There's this love of melody, which the Agnews are, instituted into that sound, and this band that actually was considered one of the forefathers of Orange County punk, the Mechanics. I think they released maybe 2 songs total, but they played house parties in Florida, and they counted fans as Mike Ness, Dennis Donnell, and Rick Agnew. It's like, well, that's kind of the cradle of where Fullerton came from, was based on that. And when HB, you could say bands like, The Crowd, who were on the first Beach Boulevard compilation, and TSOL to some degree, but that was Long Beach, border town, Long Beach,
yeah.
Orange. And
Hawthorne.
The Vandals are more beach also, but from there it's like you have the more aggressive sound because they all, they all congregated. That's the word I'm looking. They all congregated at the Cuckoo's Nest, the club that was only around for 3 years, but boy, were those 3 big years of activity and chaos.
Did the Cuckoo's Nest turn into another club? Is that the same one I'm thinking of that's there now, or did that building get torn down, or do you know the history of it?
Torn down because it was right next to a country bar, Zuby's.
Okay,
which we outlined a little bit. Which there was a couple of fights from time to time there.
Yeah, it's a hotbed of stuff. Yeah, I mean that was like the. There was one up in the valley that was the country bar but they'd have punk
Palomino.
Palomino, exactly. Yeah. Fire Hose had a live EP there, but that was also in Any Which Way But Loose, the Clint Eastwood movie, where it was Sandra Locke singing in the country western bars and stuff. But it was, so country punk in Southern California 70s, you wouldn't think they would be neighbors, but obviously they were.
Led to a lot of altercations.
but also these suburban sprawl sort of mini malls would have bars that would turn into venues, right? That would kind of become something. I'm thinking of the Wayfair is down in Costa Mesa now. I don't know, but I knew it was something before. There's a lot of these places are all, the names change over the years, but they all existed as something else. Yeah. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, there was all different little micro climates of Fullerton and Huntington Beach and, all these different, but there's like, there's also, it's not quite Orange County, but, like Torrance, Hawthorne, these, Manhattan Beach, these kinds of things too. Right. I mean, you have like, Pennywise somewhere in there. I feel like they're, neighbors with all those kind of things that would come, Red Cross, Black Flag, all that kind of stuff too. You know what I mean? It's a hop, skip, and a jump. It's one side of the street or the other, and you're in LA or you're in Orange County.
We had to draw the line at Long Beach, or else this thing was never going to end. Because we started going up, it's like, well, we could start talking about, like you said, like Descendants or Pennywise or Red Cross, and then Black Flag, obviously, then you work your way up to Suicidals, and it's like, well, now we're in Venice, and it's like, this thing is never going to end.
But at the time, and for a book, you got to have some boundaries, you got to draw some fences. But the reality of the scene or of the time was everybody was driving everywhere. I mean, that's the LA ethos, right? Which I'm sure is different than so many other places. Is for us growing up in the Inland Empire, driving an hour, 2 hours to go to a show 3 or 4 times a week was just part of the scene. You know what I mean? You knew where all the record stores were. It wasn't anything to drive a few hours, load your car up full of friends, and go to a garage, a backyard show or a garage show or something, or some weird place you just someone got a flyer like, all right, we're all going. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and a way Long Beach, Orange County worked, a lot of them didn't go up to LA. It's like, why would we drive 50 minutes to play in front of no one, and we could just go in someone's backyard 5 minutes away and just play for 4 hours and it'd just be debaucherous.
Right, right. Yeah, no, and there was so much stuff. I mean, this is later than the era described in your book, but there's, the Huntington Beach Library and the PCH, and these things were kind of the later 90s, early aughts. They were kind of more my speed, just from the age I was at. But I think it's interesting though too, because I had older brothers that graduated high school in 1988, and so I feel like so many people I interview here on the podcast, and so many things I talk about. Like I have this kind of admiration, big brother sort of little brother point of view of everything that kind of happened in that Gen X sort of punk world of stuff. I'm constantly sort of looking back to that to kind of oh wow, it must have been cooler then, or wow, how crazy this was.
There were no rules back then. It was literally the Wild West of punk, where anything went, especially in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. That era, it was just punk. It was just a scene. There were no like rules, or like you had to do this, you had to do that. There was loose rules. There was like unspoken, etiquette and things you had to abide by, but it wasn't professionalized, if you will.
Right. No, and it's interesting too, because punk was still sort of reinventing itself at that time. I mean, it was just sort of, I always think, at least looking like at the LA sort of punk or the history of punk, it was like the like X and the Germs were sort of this glam rock side, not like 80s glam hair metal, but more like the sweet, sort of like there's LA's kind of response to, what the Sex Pistols in some ways were. And then, but then the hardcore post Minor Threat, sort of that like flavor of punk came up from the suburbs, where all the Hollywood kids were still dressing more 70s and glitter. And Rodney Bingenheimer's club sort of thing. And then the shaved heads and white t-shirts and boots came from the suburbs and sort of invaded that scene.
Yeah. And I was going to say, that's how a lot of the LA people saw the OC people, as the invaders and the jocks and the people ruining the scene, where Jack Grisham is like, well, this is what you sing about. Like, let's go fuck shit up. Yeah. And it's like, you don't want us to, then what's the point? Why are you singing it? Like, it didn't like for those guys, it was like, why would you sing about it if you don't mean it? If you're more arty and it's like in theory and things like that. And he was just like, I'm like, didn't compute. It's like, okay, you wanted like a fight and have fun. It's like, to them, that was fun.
Right.
And to see that it was so poorly received was to them shocking.
Well, fuck you guys. We're going to make our own shit anyway. We don't need you. You're the old guard guy. Get out of the way. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, having chatted with Mike Watt, over the years, and, he always calls it the movement, that there wasn't punk. It was this movement that was happening. It was a youth culture, youth revolution, a youth movement. And I think that's such a nice diplomatic kind of poetic way, like everything that Watt says, has this sort of Watt speak to it. But but it was a movement, and that's a kind of amorphous, sort of boundless sort of idea. But it was energy. It was this energy of young people coming up, and it changed. And what he and Dee, the world they came up in and what they were participating in and what came right after them was so different. And then that would then become the alternative rock scene. It was the same kind of energy that was mutating every 2 to 3 years and changing into something different.
And they had this, they were lucky. They weren't part of, they were sort of, I guess, part of an SST.
Sure. Yeah.
But they were being based in Pedro. They had the freedom to do whatever the hell they wanted. They didn't.
It was the Switzerland kind of float of punk. Yeah. They weren't.
Exactly.
They weren't even Long Beach. They weren't even. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Pedro was.
They were on neutral ground, as you just said, which was allowed them to do whatever the hell they want. Which, as Mike Ness told us, one of his big things was when he wrote this self-titled album. He was just like, I was just tired of the punk rock police and them hating everything and doing this. And I just wanted to do whatever the hell I wanted, which is the attitude of what Watt and D. Boone and
punk
Hurley
is what you
did
make
with
it,
Minutemen.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And that was the one thing we learned while writing this exactly that there was no boundaries, and the best artists, not best, but the artists that had the most success and influences just went with their gut and went with what they liked, which... Could you imagine doing something in this climate? And actually having widespread success, or at least, moderate mainstream success? It just seems so foreign today.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a different world. I mean, I definitely, I devoured the chapter on Golden Voice because I had heard so many of those stories, and I think it was great that you took the time out of the book while looking at so many specific bands to really acknowledge what Golden Voice is and to sort of put those stories down on paper. Because I feel like that was always sort of the word behind the scenes is like, this is all just a weed operation. Like all these guys, especially post Coachella, where they sort of seemed very legitimized and very clean. But even growing up, it was like they were the monolith sort of like promoter. Like they were the big guy. They were big brother. You know what I mean? They put on every show was a Golden Voice show for us growing up in the 90s. And then to kind of learn through back channels like, oh, this is all just kind of a weed. It was a weed front. It was like, what? No way. It was like rumors. And then you put it in the book. I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean their first show was like, what was it, like in Santa Barbara? It was a TSOL show, and now look at them, they're promoting Justin Bieber. It's you couldn't get two diametrically opposed acts than TSOL and Justin Bieber. But look, I mean, you got to start somewhere, and it was such a ragtag operation. Like, look who the people who came out of it besides Paul and Gary. You have like Jim Guillermo, who became this giant manager, who's a big part of the book. You have Kevin Lyman, who created Warped Tour. You have all these executives who got their start there, again, as this ragtag bunch of people who just loved the music and loved the culture and just wanted to spread the word. And you never would have expected in 1981, as with Gary Tovar financing it with, some illegal activity, that it would become the 800-pound gorilla in music promotion space.
But I think it was that kind of thing. I mean, the way I always had heard it was, I think the legitimizing or the sort of the mainstreaming or just the footprint that punk had, especially Southern California punk had in the 90s specifically, was really, it wasn't, if it, not that these shows weren't popular on their own or that these bands weren't popular enough on their own, but to have an entity like Golden Voice or Gary behind there and not being afraid to lose money, especially in the beginning, it's sort of, it funded, grassroots sort of funded these things and allowed the bands the space to sort of develop and become the bigger bands and showcase those bands as well, like as though they were the Rolling Stones, when maybe there was 500 people who would be interested, but once you book out the 5,000 capacity Olympic auditorium, and now it looks like it's a much bigger thing, and you could package it to where you look like these people could all sell out large amphitheaters. And it was sort of the field of dreams of build it and they will come, that he sort of understood that in a way and built that and did it while losing money, which most scenes or most, most people didn't have a fairy godfather, blowing money, millions of dollars year after year, especially through the 80s on shows and promoting these bands just because he liked them. It was, he was willing to lose money, but that made an impact. And that was the rings of that are still being felt today, obviously through Golden Voice shows, but really the impact that he had on punk and popularizing and sort of showcasing punk as a genre.
One of the funniest things to happen on our book tour last year was we did an event at the Grammy Museum with Cat Corbett hosting it. And it was Jim Guillermo, Joe Escalante from the Vandals, and Adrian from No Doubt. It was we were on a panel. And Jim looked out into the crowd. He's like, "Is Gary here? Gary Tovar?" And he raised, he was there. He raised his hand. He was there. And we started talking. And then all of a sudden at the end, it's like, "Gary, you still there?" Out. He continues his streak of going to 2 shows a night, 7 days a week, which is unbelievable that, after he got out of prison, it's that's he's making up for lost time. And the fact that he was even there was a surprise to us. But the fact that he left to go to a show was like, that we were surprised he even made it to this thing and stuck around to hear his name mentioned, because it was like a joke when he heard Jim's like, "Oh, I didn't think you were actually here."
What do you think about what his bank account looks like? He doesn't need to be anywhere he doesn't want to be. You know what I mean? It's not about making money or networking for him at this point. These are all want tos, not have tos.
But Golden Voice was such an important part of this. It was such a decentralized promotions, but I wouldn't call it department, but world, where you just had these guys who just wanted to be in the scene pop up. Like I collected a bunch of old flyers for this. And we had a little exhibit we did at Punk Rock Museum where it was just like, "Oh, look at this, look at this, look at this." And you'd see like 10 different flyers, 10 different names on the people who presented the event.
Oh.
And until you got to the Golden Voice, like kind of pulling it all in together.
Yeah,
Who
became
added an aura of professionalism to it, but professionalism in the loosest sense of the word.
Sure. So, well, it's sort of akin to like the WWE out of all the wrestling promoters, that there was sort of this regional promotion thing, but within a microclimate of Southern California. And then once Golden Voice came, they're like, no, we got all of this. These are all our shows. This is how we're going to do
and
this.
When they are,
and everyone's going to get paid. And here's how we do this.
And when the bands played, it was like, oh my God, it's a Golden Voice event. It's like, this is the real deal. And that's what it meant to them. And Golden Voice in the national, in the grand scheme of things nationally, no one knew who it was.
Sure.
Especially in the mid 80s when punk was on life support. They were still trotting everyone out.
Yeah. No, I mean, for me growing up, I think my first show was in 92 when I was just 11. My older brothers took me to see a show, a Rock for Choice benefit show at the Palladium. But then I would go on to see many shows, and just growing up in Southern California, like everything was a Golden Voice show, and Bad Religion was on every show. I've seen Bad Religion more than any band I've ever seen, and I've never bought a Bad Religion ticket. I've never tried to see Bad Religion, but they just were on every single fucking show. But it was always, Golden Voice show. And then even the Glass House was a venue that opened up right in the era of me going to shows, and it was right in my backyard. It was 10 minutes from the house. And so to have that, and that was a Golden Voice, owned venue, when they sort of figured that thing out. And then going to the El Rey, and again, that's a Golden Voice owned venue. And they sort of figured out, how to work within their own sort of ecosystem of stuff where they'd own the venues and things, and getting in and knowing. I had a friend who was dating Paul, younger Paul, who was at Golden Voice for years. And I'm spacing out Paul Billings, who was like little Paul. There was, anyway, he was the box office guy at the Glass House. And then I think he went on to run the El Rey for a while, and I think he left. But yeah, it was fun just knowing him. And I would just show up to sometimes the shows, like, oh, hey, here you go. Here's some tickets. Here's some passes. And I was able to get in. I saw so many great shows there at the Glass House.
They're all characters, those guys.
I bet. Yeah. No. And I remember saying it was even the roadie crew, or the guys getting people on and off stage. You could start to recognize who these people were, or even going to like shows at the Fonda now. And it's like, oh yeah, I know. I've been seeing you at shows. I've been going to shows since I was a teenager. And then, being
it's in a family.
Band, being in a band and getting to play some of these shows too. I was like, oh wow. Okay. It's really funny to see how that still all works. So that was cool to sort of see that in the book and sort of understand, the scene, not just built from within the bands, but you had to have somebody with more of a vision or a sort of a sense of like, what could this all mean? How do you sort of group this thing into a scene? Right.
Yeah, and the adults in the room weren't initially the adults in the room either. They had to become the adults in the room, sometimes not by choice.
That's interesting. What you mean, like the Golden Voice people sort of taking on that responsibility to sort of create?
Or some of them people who became managers who were just friends, and like and all of a sudden they were thrusted into a role, and they had to someone had to do it. And it's like, well, you're our friend, or you were the person we hung out with. Why don't you do it? And it's like, well, the record label. It's like, oh, this guy knows something about music. Well, they're a record company now, and all that's the ultimate DIY culture, especially back then when no one was going to Orange County to sign artists. Like, and it took until the Offspring pretty much for that to happen. Dexter told the story how I think it was right before he started his label, Nitro, that there was like A&R guys like stayed like waiting out for him as he went to throw his garbage away. And it's like, well, you weren't here before. like why would like go away type of thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Epic.
And a lot of those guys are still down there, which speaks to the normalcy of what they are and what they believe, and how fame, I mean, it's changed them in some ways, but the fact that many of them haven't left Orange County speaks to the reverence they have for the place, and the understanding among residents to they're one of us.
Right. Yeah. No, I was
them being one of us.
I was just looking up. There was a funny thing that came across my feed on Instagram of stories of, with No Doubt now playing the Sphere, and, and the sort of some of the fans, but like not new fans, like old fans, people, fans that were stalking No Doubt in the 90s. They're talking about going by the house, and like the house, and the brothers still live there. Eric still lived at the house and on Halloween would give out candy and stuff, and people would know and go take photos. I think their original No Doubt house was in Anaheim, and it was in some music videos. Then there was the grandma's house, and there was all these great stories of fans like just talking about, going by the house and just knocking on the door, and the brother giving out flyers and stickers and things, and that's, again, yeah, like it's just a mom and pop operation. Like, yeah, that's that was my band. Now it's my sister's band. I mean, how much of that No Doubt story did you know prior to going into the book, and where does that kind of fit in? Like, how do you sort of place No Doubt in the overall sort of scene of that? I mean, I think their stardom is probably the most meteoric of all of that. If you think about Orange County on a pop global sense, like they're a band that just is, it's impossible to quantify their success.
Yeah, they came out of a branch of ska punk, which had its home there, and in places like Fender's Ballroom in Long Beach is where they cut their teeth, and outside of additional parties. But they had how much of it I knew before. I loosely knew. I didn't know as much as we drilled into, but I knew that they had a different singer when they started. I knew he died young. And I knew there were a bunch of members that shuffled in and out before the lineup as constituted today became a thing. And it they were the hardest ones to get to, but their story is, as you said, meteoric, and but it wasn't though, because they chipped away on their own time. Like they worked really hard to build a following, and they were one of the earliest bands signed to Interscope. So they'd never been on any other label besides Interscope when it just started out. And they did everything. It was an ultimate DIY culture though. They would have parties where, by parties, it's just them getting together and just answering fan mail and doing all this stuff together, and literally writing it back and posting it and making their own flyers and really pounding the pavement and working hard to make their vision come true. And their first album didn't sell well, and they were worried about how things would turn out. And then they made the rare, unheard of decision to release the B-sides to an album that didn't even come out yet, Beacon Street Collection, before Tragic Kingdom. And then once Tragic Kingdom came out, I mean, that thing was a runaway freight train and changed how everything was. And I remember there's a story in there where Adrian and Johnny Two Bags are sitting together because they played a Golden Voice show. They played a number of them at UCI, and Adrian played Johnny Two Bags the record. He's like, "You guys are going to be massive, like this thing is." And I mean, when you hear those songs, even today, 31 years later, those songs, they're timeless. Like, that's why they're playing in Vegas to how many nights in front of sold out crowds. Yeah, that it traces their history. And we were lucky to speak with them about that and see some of the archives that were saved over the years that really told an interesting story about how they weren't this, I would say coattail band. They really did it themselves and had friends with they were friends with Fishbone, and they would hang out. Fishbone guys would go down into Anaheim and hang out at the Stefani house.
Sure.
They weren't like these carpetbaggers. They were the real deal. And it shows today when you have this mix of sound, and it still attracts, the original fans and their pop fans and the younger fans today. It just speaks to everything that they did.
Yeah. But I mean, there were almost two different bands in some ways, where there was the kind of the traditional ska band fronted by Gwen Stefani's brother, and then the pop band that, when she sort of took the reins as the front person and sort of filtered through into this sort of 4-piece pop ska punk.
Yeah, you look carefully and you could see him on the cover of Tragic Kingdom.
Yeah. No, I know it's all part of, it wasn't like there was a falling out or it was bad blood, but it was we're just going to keep going.
Oh, he went to go work on The Simpsons.
So it all works out.
That was what he, yeah.
Yeah, it was meant to be. Yeah, it's incredible, just sort of, reflecting on all these little experiences. And like you said, that flavor of punk that would come out of these suburbs, and I think, and there was really something about that kind of DIY stuff, or it really made it feel as though anybody can do this. There was that sort of feeling of being a garage band or playing in, local shows. I know Cal State Fullerton was a big hotbed of shows. Like on the college campus, they would have these lunch shows. I have great photos. Like I said, I have two older brothers who are really into music, and my oldest brother Sam, he has this great photo album. He took pictures of No Doubt playing a daytime show, and this was in probably 1998 or probably 1989. And it was just, there's maybe 100 people, maybe 200 people just outside on a pavilion there. And, it was kind of when she was still dressing like Madonna and Desperately Seeking Susan, all the kind of the lace and the frilly tutus and things.
Got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's so cool. And then I remember I saw at the drive-in probably in 99 or 2000 at Cal State Fullerton. It was the kind of thing like, oh yeah, I've heard these guys are cool. And driving over there and just seeing like, whoa. And it was one of the most explosive shows I had seen. And I think they played the Troubadour the next year or the next day or so, or they were like within like, then it was like, oh, okay. Within like a year they became what the drive-in, record was before that Grand Royal record. But it was a cool place. It was just another one of those many kind of venues that sort of just Southern California has, just random places to see shows.
That's why it's the play. I mean, without that infrastructure of having all these venues or the wherewithal that kids who love music and want to have parties, it couldn't. And the weather, underrated element is the weather. I mean, being able to have a party
all year long in any backyard, any place in any suburb, could be hosting the next, big band.
Can hone your craft there.
Right. Yeah. It sort of seems how it was. Yeah. I know where we grew up, there was, we were close to Covina, and my brothers would tell stories about seeing Motley Crue at backyard parties. They were a backyard cover band, and then eventually they would go on to become what they became, through the later half of the 80s. But in those early days, and again, and the same stories with like Van Halen, they were a cover band and party band, and they'd bring their own PA. There's an easy way to get gigs. Just say you had your own PA. And you could, and you're instantly on.
That's how David Lee Roth joined the band. That was because of that.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, just in general. I mean, it's your book. Encapsulates something small. Like, was there stuff you had to cut out, or what? If you had an extra 100 pages, or if you were able to go back and add in more stuff, like what got cut from the book that you wish still made it? I know that's an integral part of publishing anything. Is you have to kill your babies, and there's things that just you never would have thought the book could have lived without, be it had to. What are some of those things that got cut out?
No, I think we were okay with that. We got in most of the stuff, like 97% of what we wanted to get in.
Okay.
And there was some stuff we wish we could have gotten, but we didn't get. That was more of the thing. It wasn't that we did.
Meaning interviews,
we didn't have it
or stories.
Yeah, like we got. Yeah, well, we got everything. Most of the big ones we had corroborated, but it was one of those things like we didn't really leave anything on the cutting room floor. There was a little bit, but we felt we were eking towards our word count. We were on the very edge of it, so we knew we had where we had to stop, and it was one of those things. Even after our deadline, more stuff would come up where we'd have to keep adding and adding. Where we was more like, okay, we got nothing that we're going to get additionally, unless it's this person is really going to make a difference to the telling the full story. Like we got the story. It's like, are we going to sprinkle in now these like nuggets and details? And it's like, we kind of got most of that. It's like, unless there's some crazy anecdote that we're not aware of.
Was there anything you weren't allowed to put in that you'd learned that you can kind of speak around? Was there anything that you had to keep out for any reasons?
There were some interband squabbles that some people didn't want to have their certain dirty laundry aired, is the best I could say.
Okay. That makes sense. And that's just par for the course of covering bands. I mean, it's the messiest relationships anybody that calls himself an adult will ever have. It's very little to do with being an adult, about being in a band. What has the response been? Now we say, we're a year in, we're a little bit on the back end of the publicity tour. I'm sure you've talked to everything, but I'm sure you've heard from the audience and from the fans. Like what's some of this response that you've heard that stands out in your mind?
Just the thing that means the most is that the people like it and that they felt like it was a story that was worth being heard. That's what it confirmed, everything we hoped for when we started out in 2019.
Okay. But has anybody, any other bands reached out like, oh, I was a fan of this and I read your book and now I know, like any kind of on the celebrity front of people that have approached you after the fact?
There were a couple. There was a couple surprises along the way, and it's been really nice to have support from the people in there, because those are the people you would think would be the hardest to please, because we forgot something that's the most minutia of detail. But it's been mostly supportive because they see the big picture, how it tells us the overarching story is how it's not that it's this music. It's more like these determined people and kids that didn't let geography or distance or anything get in their way. They went out and did it and made something. And now there's a document telling that story, and it's not going to be falling to the wayside, and that their legacy is now preserved in a certain written format.
That's great. Another one of the Venn diagrams that the Orange County punk crosses over in my mind is the skateboarding world. I mean, how important, how do you kind of characterize the role that skateboarding had in this Orange County punk scene? What was that? What was its role?
The song, like the Offspring songs were on all those videos. And if you go to look at something like Tony Hawk, the soundtracks, like the most recent one still had Amoeba by Adolescents on it, which the song came out in 1980. So the fact that that song is still living on a soundtrack that was released in 2026 says everything. And we got to speak with Tony Hawk about this type of music, because he said whenever he would drive up from San Diego to go to skating competitions, he'd hear Rodney on the Rock, and he'd hear Adolescents, he'd hear bands like that, and the bands that he liked. And that's how he knew he was, working his way up north, was hearing those type of bands, and it became the soundtrack to essentially his life.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah. And a lot of the shows were skateboard related shows, or there was things, either at skate competitions or demos, or there would be a ramp in the backyard, or sort of seemed to just kind of go hand in hand with that kind of punk movement, or that development of punk in the embracing of skateboard culture, especially in Southern California. That was something I know. Yeah. Both my brothers surfed and skated, and it was always, music was always just a huge part of that. That's even outside of the videos, just being around as part of the social sort of scene. It's like you'd skate all day and go see a show that night. And that was something I think we sort of inherited even into the 90s. The boards looked different, they became little smaller wheels, and the pants became baggier, but it was the same kind of idea. I saw Face to Face at a backyard, or at a skateboard shop demo in the parking lot. And it was this great kind of demo, everyone's skating during the day, and then the band started and everyone's skating while the bands were playing. And then I got kicked in the head in the pit watching. I think it was like Game Face and then Face to Face, sort of these like Southern California, punk bands. And it was, I was 14. And it was like, this is the best. Life never gets better than this. And that was always the dirty secret that Dean and I had in the band. He liked Face to Face as well. And so we, on those dark nights driving somewhere through Sweden, we were just exhausted and delirious on tour. Like, okay, let's put on Face to Face. Like,
hey, nothing wrong with Trevor's a great songwriter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think he owes a lot to Mike Ness as well. I don't think we knew that at the time. That's true. But I'm sure he would even cop to that as well. The influence of that. Yeah. So what's next? What are you working on now? Where do you go from here?
Working on some adjacent projects for this book. We're working on a second one right now. That's the spinoff of the first one. More news when when that's ready to be shared.
Exciting.
But I just can't believe it's been over a year. It's like it was a whirlwind of a year, and I'm just happy that people still care about it. And just it doesn't speak to us as much as it speaks to the power and longevity of what these guys did.
Yeah,
and gals did.
It's incredible. And then outside of Orange County, I mean, are you looking at any other scenes, or is there more stuff? I mean, that you're thinking of in terms of that, like writing about music from different times, different areas, or is it more just kind of focusing in that Orange County sort of world?
In terms of
what you're working on
books?
Next, or or just where your interests are, like where would you go after this?
I always try to look forward with projects. The second book is a bit of a spin-off of the first one, at least the idea of it. So we'll see how that lands. Gotcha. But it's still very relevant to culture today. It's still very much a big part of it.
That's great. Yeah, and I guess it's interesting, that there was no other real Orange County books out.
Crazy, because the one person who we thought would have wrote it and was probably better equipped than us to write it. Mike Bohm, he was a longtime music writer for LA Times. He died not a little bit before we started this project, and if not for him, this book never could have happened, because we cited him so many times because he was just on the scene and broke all the news that came out of there. And it was probably at the time a thankless beat to go cover music in Orange County. And he left this treasure trove of like archives of like interviews with the Cadillac Tramps from like 1991 that we could have never had. We were alive, but we were not there.
Yeah.
So it's like we're very grateful to his contributions, and he's one of the first people we thanked in our acknowledgement section because of that. And his legacy hopefully lives on with that work.
That's great.
At least that's our hope.
Yeah. It's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, that hits on a point of what, obviously one writer's opinion, but where do you see sort of the state of music journalism today and going forward? How does it look from your perspective? I mean, I know for me as a musician and now turned podcaster, I know where I'm coming from it, but how do you see the landscape of, music journalism? Journalism writ large has its own sort of opinion, but I mean, in terms of music and sort of where its place is and its role and where does it fit? What does it look like?
It's grim in terms of larger. If you want to write for a major outlet or hope that it's going to bring you fortune and glory, that's probably not it. But trying to be positive, if you have a newsletter or you're DIY and you have a following that an audience you've cultivated on your own, then the odds are you're probably going to have a little bit more of success. But in terms of getting something from the old structure, it's pretty tough out there. But if you have a podcast and do stuff you're on your own, I mean, and you do it for the love of doing it, not to get rich, the riches will come eventually if you really believe and build something that you believe in and that is authentic to who you are and what people, your audience wants to hear from you. That's the way you succeed. And music journalism as an entity is in rough shape.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I talk to a lot of younger bands or older bands, and just even this idea of what does it mean to be a successful musician in 2026, 2027? People out there creating projects right now, today. What is the hope? What happens? You get 1 million views on TikTok. That's a metric, that can result in maybe a record deal. Maybe there's a booking agent and there's, do you sell tickets? Someone told me the other day, there's 2 T's that rule music now in terms of the commercial side of things, where it's tickets and t-shirts. That's it. That's what you're trying. That's all boats, all arrows point towards tickets and t-shirts. That's all you can do in terms of making any money playing music. And I was like,
It seems safer and more sustainable than relying on streams.
Oh yeah. No, that becomes instantaneous. You feel that, where that used to be something, there'd be a record sale. You'd see there was words like royalties or mechanicals, or there was words like sales, but those words, have disappeared. But
if you have a rabid and loyal following, it doesn't matter if you're a band or a writer. If you have people willing to pay for what you do, that's to me what success would be. And yes, you're not going to be getting $1 million advances for books or whatever. But if you're making money doing this, and you're able to live off of it, that's a win.
That's great. Yeah. Speaking of which, where can people follow you? How do people find out more about you and follow you and see what you're doing and what your work is bringing to the world?
My Instagram is at the Daniel Kohn, Kohn, and I'm on the usual suspects, I guess. I'm on Twitter is just my full name at Daniel Kohn, and I guess Blue Sky, it's whatever that is, but starts with my full name, then whatever the rest is. And I'm not on TikTok. I feel like I'm too old for that. And those are the platforms I'm primarily on.
That's great. So people can follow you there and find out the next. And everyone should go buy the book.
And OC Punk Book. Yeah. OC Punk Book Instagram is all right. We share nostalgic things from the era of our book when we see them, and then we have relics that we uncovered or that we pop up occasionally, and there'll be more information about the paperback when the time comes as well.
That's exciting. That's exciting. Yeah. No, I mean, it's an interesting, slice of time and location. And obviously, by the bands that came out of it and the music that was made and the records that were left. But I'm constantly, you just scratch the surface still here in Southern California and the music scene. And you find the tentacles and the roots go so deep and so far, you can see so much of that world still out there. And whether it's, you're playing at a venue, well, what this venue used to be, or, what this amp was, or, who his uncle is. So it's, every story's got turns somewhere, and you find yourself back in Orange County talking about, all the bands you've covered in the book. So it does.
Yeah. The guys who would dumpster dive at the Fender factory and things like that when it was in Fullerton.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
One man's trash was another man's treasure.
But even that, I mean, even, Southern California, going back to just that birth of rock and roll, in the Fender plant, being down there in Fullerton, and car culture, and those car colors influencing what then the guitar colors became, and this kind of modular nature of it all, of, what I mean? These weren't pieces of art. This was sort of commercial, mechanical, hobbyists sort of thing. You know what I mean? You can get a candy colored red guitar with a different neck and different pickups, and you customize it. It's just like Vans shoes. You go to the Vans factory and you bring your own fabric, and they turn those into boat shoes for you. My mom and dad loved telling the stories of going down there in the 70s, and, you get a pair of shoes for $5, and you pick out your own colors and your own fabrics, your own swatches, and, you'd get them made for you right there. You could cut. It was all about that customizing, sort of that Southern California, everything, kind of, bright suns and cars and surfboards and guitars. It was this whole, that's where that came from. And then, I think the fallout of that into then Reagan's 80s, sort of bred this punk, the next generation of that, the post-war suburban sprawl of Southern California begets the next thing, begets the next, and onwards.
Indeed.
Awesome, Daniel. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for jumping on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
There'll be links in the show notes for where everyone can go buy the books and where they can follow you.
Sweet.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah. I mean, the books, the usual suspects. I mean, if you must go to Amazon, but otherwise I always say support your independent bookstore.
Absolutely.
They need your help now more than ever. So that's what we've been hoping where people get it. So, or record stores if they have them too.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. All right. Support mom and pops. All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks. There he is, Daniel Kohn. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Everybody go buy the book. Go support music journalism. Go read about your favorite bands. No Doubt, Sublime, TSOL, Social Distortion, The Offspring, and many, many more. What else we got on here? Yeah, Tales of the Cuckoo's Nest, Disneyland, all random, it's all hodgepodge. I don't think it wasn't designed for this, right? We just kind of lucked out and made it. I was a lot of skateboarding too. I mean, that was definitely a big part of my memory. I don't even know if we even got into that in our discussion, but skating through Orange County, and it just seemed never ending. There was always something, you know what I mean? The Huntington Beach High School was wild. The park in the corner, but then even just, the school itself was open, and it was great. It was like, it definitely felt like the whole world kind of felt like Disneyland at that point, being a teenager with some friends who could drive, with their license, and we're just running around, going to shows, skating. That's a lot of fun. All right, everybody be safe this weekend. Happy 4th of July for those who celebrate it. And, I'll see you on Monday. I will do a Hyphenate halftime breakdown about all things we talked about this one. And, what are we talking about this weekend too? Logan's Run. We're going to go over some Logan's Run. All right, everybody. Bye.
I had South by all day, all night, and then I had to write for 3 hours when I got back to the room, and then, wash, rinse, repeat on like 2 hours of sleep every day.